Hello, everyone. Welcome to Good Journeys Tarot. I'm Rosemary, and today we are going to be talking about the devil. Interesting card that pops up from time to time, and has had a lot of different incarnations throughout history. The original devil, based on Pan, kind of a trickster. And I actually have a copy of that I forgot to grab uh, in my deck of the bastards. But since then, it kind of updated to this kind of demon with two other smaller demons in chain. And it was a hermaphrodite, having both breasts of a woman and the penis of a man. And eventually it evolved to the point that now it's usually pictured as a demon, the devil, with two people, a man and a woman. Um, so we're going to be talking about that today and what I ended up with in my work with the card this week. But before we get started, I thought I'd just chat about my week and greet everyone. Welcome, Jackie. So glad to have you here today. Please do say hello as you pop in today so I'll know who's with us. Um, it's been a slow mail week. In fact, I'm not really expecting anything in the mail except for one deck, which I ordered months ago, in the next few weeks. But this week I did get a book in the mail that I had ordered from Lulu. And that is this monster here. And this is actually the workbook for Benabel Wynn's witchcraft fundamentals of witchcraft course, which is based on Eliphas Levi's The Doctrinal Basis of Transcendental Magic. And his book has 22 chapters. This is only the first 13, of which Benabel has added her own annotations in the columns. And so that you can work through it. It follows along with the 22 major arcana. So this should be an interesting thing to study alongside my Cube of Space study this year, as it also relates to the 22 Hebrew alphabets and their corresponding cards. So be working through the major arcana on several different fronts this year and looking forward to it. So I did start Crossing Swords, which is an animation on Hulu this weekend, while I sat and debated getting out and seeing human beings, because I am getting a little cooped up in my house at the moment. Hi, Gerald. Welcome. Glad to have you here. And so I finally decided that because the venue had no code of protocols at all in place, and I really wasn't looking forward to wearing a mask all night, that I would just stay home and enjoy some movies and television and have some drinks with the puppies, right? But I am going to go out right after this broadcast today and enjoy some time out in the fresh air. So looking forward to that. Hi, Scott. Welcome. Glad to have you here. So as I said at the beginning, we are here to talk about the devil from the Smith-Waite version right here. And as I mentioned a moment ago, there have been different variations of this card. And if you'll bear with me, I'm going to go grab one that I forgot to pull out before. And so sometimes this card is associated with the Christian idea of the devil. Sometimes it's associated with kind of a trickster being like Pan. Occasionally, you'll see it associated with Baphomet or with other gods or goddesses that are related to the idea of hell or Hades. And so you kind of get the impression that this is about a influence in your life that may or may not be the most positive. It's the idea of taking something to excess, perhaps, at times. Here we go. This is actually a fun depiction of the devil card. This is from the deck of the Bastard. I believe the original image is from an Atea deck, maybe, or a Visconti deck. Didn't look it up beforehand to actually know, but kind of that trickster spirit, a little bit of deception going on, which is something we sometimes can see with this card. And so let's hop right in and look at some of the other cards in my collection. I showed this one at the beginning of the broadcast. This is a Marseille card from the Millennium Edition. And you'll see, as I mentioned, that the devil was previously depicted as a hermaphrodite, and there were actually demons in the card versus what we see today as in this Golden Tarot, which is human beings with a demon or devil. And that kind of depiction leads to the idea of sexuality, right? When we have a male and a female in a card. And so some people actually embrace that in their cards, this being the Fyodor Pavlov. In the Spirit Keepers Tarot, Benabel Wynn used the dragon and this phoenix, which are representative of the masculine and feminine, and called it the demon versus, say, the devil. This is a depiction of the Ellis deck, which is kind of cool. This is one of the few ones where you see multiple people in it. And it is also grabbing onto that idea of puppet strings that we often get with this card based on the chains. And there are actually a whole bunch of different people doing a whole bunch of different things in that card. This might hurt, which kind of depicts drinking and smoking and things like that people tend to see as a negative. And we're going to get back to this idea that this is a negative card in a little bit. The Muse Tarot, using the idea of puppet strings again in a very different way. And probably my favorite depiction in my collection at the moment is this one. This is from, of course, the Light Seers Tarot. I think that most people attracted to men would find this an appealing devil card for various reasons. Again, that idea of puppet string, something's being controlled. Are you the one in control or is someone else in control? Is this circumstance within your realm of action, or is someone else exerting their viewpoints on you? The Urban Tarot also kind of adopts this idea of as a man. The Good Karma Tarot actually is an interesting take on this, in which there's only one person as looking at the devil like, yeah, right. She knows that she's going to get out of this kind of thing. And that idea of being bound is called in a lot of cards. This is actually the name of the devil card in the Hip Chick Tarot. And yeah, so eroticism does get brought into this card a lot of times, but it was originally not part of the card, right? It was something that was brought in by people in the esoteric community over time, originally it being more of a trickster, a negative influence possibly, but not necessarily sexuality. But because in the Christian mindset, which a lot of esotericism came out of, and mysticism that went into the esoteric cards, the idea of sex being bad became a big part of the devil. And this is the Golden Girls Tarot. This is probably one of the only cards from that deck I'll pull out, because it's the only one that's a variant from the Smith-Waite imagery, the idea of indulgence, and a little indulgence perhaps not being a bad thing, versus any indulgence being bad. Here's another card where the devil was renamed, trying to get away from that Christian idea, called the shadow. And in this case, you're actually bound by yourself, and your own stuff, right? It's not coming from anywhere else but yourself. This card from the Spacious Tarot actually depicts that idea of shadow, without actually picturing a being or beings in the devil card. Now, the devil can sometimes come up as problematic in decks, depending on how it is depicted. One of those, which a lot of people have had a negative experience with, is the slow tarot. This idea of indulgence or overindulgence, and I apologize for the dogs barking downstairs. I don't know what they're seeing at the moment. Okay, they've stopped for a second. But having a plus-sized woman in the card, rather than see representation, people saw it as being big is bad. Okay, and so the idea, which I brought up before in talking about cards, is okay, we want representation in our cards, but are we not allowed to have representation in all of the cards or only some of the cards? And it makes it, I guess, interesting when you are the artist creating a card to decide, yes, I want representation throughout the deck, but should you represent people in cards that might be construed as negative, or ideas that might be construed as by negative by some people? This came up with the Ten of Swords in the Light Seers originally, and a lot of people defended it. People of color who said no, it was a great concept, but nonetheless, the card was redone. Another idea that comes up occasionally in the Devil is kink or BDSM. Here you have a dominatrix. This is from the Modern Love Tarot, and my first thought when I saw this is, okay, some people are going to look at this and go, BDSM is bad, kink is bad, this sex is bad, right? But knowing this creator and having heard them talk about their deck, I know that was not their intention. And so for me, when I look at this card, it brings out the idea that a little bit of indulgence is not a bad thing, right? It's okay to enjoy things. It's up to a point, right? And I think that's one of the ideas when we see this card that we have to really think about, is this a point where I am overindulging, or where I just have not been indulging at all and maybe I need to indulge a little? And I think that context comes from the other cards that surround the devil in your reading. So those are some of the cards from my collection. When I first started drawing the card and sketching ideas, be prepared for some nudity. I also was looking at the idea of a hermaphrodite, and also did another version with the wings, so it was more like an angel than a demon, which is a very kind of a Christian idea more so than anything. But in the end, I really prefer the idea of shadow. Something to represent that idea that you know everything in moderation. It's okay to enjoy sex, food, alcohol, whatever, within a particular moderation, right? Because you overdo it, then you feel it, right? And so that's kind of where I was going when I created the card. But before we look at my card, let's look at my coloring here. I'm going to use it as the example for talking about the card. Um, I tried to maybe brighten it up a little bit. For me, this card always looks to me when I see it as like monochromatic and like dull. And so I did try to brighten it up a little bit with my coloring, but for the most part, I left it as it was. Um, but let's talk about this card. So this card is called the Lord of Gates of Matter. Basically, the idea being that this represents the absence of spirit, esoterically. This is all that is worldly. And so that's where we get this idea of materialism. That's where we get the idea of sexuality, at least in the Christian mindset. Um, but also this card is the Capricorn energy, Capricorn being um the goat, that being the worldly, that being connected to all of your senses, right? And yet also influenced by Saturn, and Saturn being that boundaries or limitations. So it's about the limitations that are brought about by the world, right? It's about the boundaries that are set by the decisions we make on the physical plane. Um, so that's where we get this idea of bondage. And so we see the chains that are wrapped around them. That's where we might get the idea of addiction, um, um, of temptation or obstacles, or even deception from this card. And other ideas that come up with it often are selfishness and ignorance. So basically, this is all about the physical. There is no spirit here. And so there's a sense that you're missing something, i.e., ignorance. There can be confusion. Why am I feeling trapped? What is going on that has me bound, and is limiting me? Um, and there can be attachment. We the chains are there. Did we allow them to be put upon us? Were they forced upon us? But yet they are just barely wrapped around our neck, right? So can break, and that's kind of the shadow side of this card, is we're able to break free from this. We're able to reclaim our power. We're able to be released from the fear, which for a lot of people, they get from this card fear, because of the demon and the chains on the human figures, who are implied to be male and female, but they actually have tails. So they still harken back to that idea of demons in the Marseille. Looking over my notes to make sure I haven't left out anything important that I really wanted you guys to hear from me. I actually played around with a lot of different ideas for the devil, because I initially had been drawing this kind of hermaphroditic angel or demon. And then I was like, yeah, but if I'm removing the specific religious connotations that are in the deck and trying to relate it to me personally, then what is it going to look like? And I started playing with the seven deadly sins, and then I thought, well, no, those are really a part of the seven of cups, which we haven't gotten to yet. And while they relate, that's where I really came up with this thought in my head, and that connected with me, was that everything in moderation, because each of the seven deadly sins represents something that in of themselves is actually wonderful and beautiful. It's when they go to excess, okay, that they become these seven deadly sins, so to speak, like lust, okay? The idea that, sex is bad, well, it's not always. Sometimes it's very good, but there are times where it's unhealthy. And so there's this idea that a lot of people work with now is that this represents unhealthy attitudes, right? So when you see this card come up, what unhealthy thing is going on that is currently limiting you or inhibiting you from doing the thing, being successful where you're trying to be successful, and that type of thing. Take, greed. So greed comes from this idea of wanting more. Well, having things is not in itself a bad thing, right? We actually need certain things to survive. And so for me now, this pretty much has come to the idea of unhealthy attitudes that actually stem from me versus an outside force. And so that's why I called the card the shadow when I created it. And I'm going to go ahead and add this here so we can talk about it a little bit. I want a big shout out of thanks to Gerald Tarot Stash for the idea that I ended up with in the end. This was actually the first incarnation of this card after I went through 3 or 4 other designs. And the idea here being the shadow person, the devil as it were, is myself. And it is the same person, which is in the 5 of Cups. So if you don't remember the 5 of Cups, there's this figure, the exact same figure, standing next to a stream with a city in the background with a little pride flag. And then there's 3 spilt bottles and 2 bottles of water next to them. The idea being that the shadow is that part of you that's holding you back. You are limiting yourself. And in that 5 of Cups, in fact, in most of the 5s, the idea there is that, there is something in the way. And to me, those 5s really relate to the devil. But if you look, there on the hoodie is this red woman trying to spring forth, right? And so my idea here being that, hearkening back to that 5 of Cups, that there is a brighter side, a brighter person, a better version of me striving to get out. And so the chains are holding that person from getting out, right? For me, at least, that's the way I view it. But the chains are just hanging there. I can remove them at any time that I want to, right? So let's go ahead. Let me move over here. There we go. So I played with darkening and lightening the figure, but I left the figure kind of grayish because it was supposed to be the same person in the 5 of Cups. I played with adding the pentagram and the goat for the Capricorn. And this is when Gerald's great idea came up. We didn't really like the goat when we talked about that online. And we are discussing this in my Facebook group. So if you're not part of that group, please do join Good Journeys into Tarot. Give me your thoughts on the cards as we're showing them during the week, what you like, don't like, that type of thing. And so I played around with moving it into several different positions. And Gerald was like, you know what? Why aren't the chains the pentagram? And so the idea of the pentagram here is that this represents what is unhealthy, right? Because it's in reverse. It's not upright, representing the flow of energy in the universe. It is now upside down. So it's the unhealthy attitudes which are holding us back. And so for me, that's kind of the core essence of the shadow card or the devil. And yeah, so that's how I ended up where I ended up with the devil. Tarot Stash says, oops. Oh, wait. Oh, I see. So I am playing with my technology a little bit. I actually, there we go. Obsession is when the devil comes into play. Yes, it can be about obsession. And your obsessions can be those things which are holding you back. which are getting in your way, which are limiting and creating boundaries to have to overcome. So have fun, Gerald, at your party. Thanks for being here for as long as you have and for your contributions. Uh, let's draw our card for next week. One more. Okay, Ace of Swords. So this is our first ace. And like my first court card, I really had no idea where he was going or where he would end up. And so the Ace of Swords. And so this will be interesting. I have to figure out how I'm going to handle the aces now in my deck, what they're going to look like, and what they're going to be. I will tell you, as I worked through my deck creation process, which started 10 years ago, my view of the cards as I'm creating them is that they're blades for swords because I wanted to use various knives, scissors, things like that. Vessels for cups because I wanted to use, bowls and vases and fountains and different things. And then I think stones, because I felt like stone could apply to gold, silver, crystals, rocks, it could be anything related to the earth, really. And I've really struggled with the wand suit. I don't know what to call the wands because other than wands, but I didn't so much. I want to be able to use things like tree branches and uh, stabs and signpost and things like that. And so I haven't quite figured out what I want to call them. I've played with stabs, but stabs doesn't roll off the tongue, right? But as you've seen me creating my cards, I'm not really putting the names of the suits on there. I'm only putting the number and the elemental symbol, so the elemental glyph. It's only on the court cards where it really becomes an issue of naming them after a particular suit. So those are things that I'll be playing with, particularly as I write, Gerald. That's one of the possibilities that I talked about, very much so. So yes, we're going to be working with this. Oh, I've lost it now. I'll have to go find it again. With the Ace of Swords this coming week. Please do join the Facebook group, Good Journeys into Tarot, so that you can get in on the conversation. And as we create that card, I want to thank everyone who tuned in today and who has contributed to the creation of this card this week online. And please, if you're not already following me on Instagram, please do that as well. I am loving my little TikToks, even if no one else is. And they're actually, the devil has more likes than any other card so far on TikTok. So do, if you have TikTok at all and you want to check those out, I've done little videos of each card we've created so far with a little music and whatnot. So, and it's at Good Journeys Tarot everywhere on social media that I'm active. So check that out. Sticks. Interesting. Yeah. So they're actually a deck that uses matchsticks as I think the wands. Yeah, interesting concept. I'll have to think about that. I don't think I have to decide it just yet, but I'll have to make a decision by the time I get to any of the wands court cards. All right, everybody, until next time, good journeys. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. And tune in Wednesday for week 3 of prompts from Papa Squirrel's Vlogmas 2021.